Please listen.
A woman who was diagnosed
Listen
with
up.
coronavirus there, and there the authorities said that she was also in Qom here in Iran. There's one senior health ministry official here in Iran who said that they believe that it originated in Qom. It's unclear how it was contracted there. They were saying that possibly there might have been Chinese workers in Qom. However, that's not something that has been confirmed by the authorities yet. And they're also saying, obviously, that this is now spread to other cities as well. There was a case from Arak. There was a case from Babel as well. So it certainly is something that's a factor. And if you look at polling places like this one, what we've been seeing is that there is an increasing amount of people who are wearing protective gear, who are wearing masks, who are wearing gloves. Obviously, they don't want to take any risks as they come out and perform their civic duty, as the Supreme Leader said people should come out and actually cast their ballots here in this election. Linda?
Fred, a couple of years ago, US President Trump ripped up the nuclear deal, put more sanctions in place on Iran. I'm wondering how those sanctions are impacting health services there and the ability of Iranian authorities to both test for this virus and contain it.
Well, in general, it's unclear what impact it has on trying to contain the coronavirus. However, there have been some medical kits and some kits that are trying to detect the coronavirus that have been sent by the World Health Organization. The Iranians in general are saying that their health system is still very much working, and they try to make up for some of the shortages with some homegrown technology that they have. But it's absolutely no secret that the sanctions certainly had a big impact on the medical sector. We've been to hospitals here in the past who have told us very difficult for them to get some of the drugs they need, very difficult for them to get spare parts for some of the machines that they need. And that's not because, Linda, because there's sanctions on the medical sector. That's not the case. The big problem is that a lot of outside companies, international companies, are in fear of doing business with Iran for being possibly sanctioned by the United States. Also, it's impossible for Iranian hospitals, for Iranian medical companies to pay outside companies, at least directly, because they are not part of the worldwide electronic payment system. So they have to do everything in cash. It's had a big impact on the medical system here. One of the folks in a hospital we spoke to said they have trouble getting cancer drugs, and in general, very difficult to get some of that specialized medicine that people need. And that, of course, is something that could also have an impact when you're dealing with a wider health emergency like the pandemic, the global pandemic that is the coronavirus, Linda.
Absolutely. And Fred, in terms of the election, President Rouhani has been on an agenda to modernize Iran since being elected back in 2013. Given what we know about the candidates up for this election, how could that determine the path Iran takes going forward?
I think that the election today could be a pivotal one for the country. It really is going to depend what the makeup of the new parliament is going to be. And the indications before the election happened, the run-up to the election, are that the hardliners, the conservative forces, are probably going to have more power than they had before. Now, Hassan Rouhani is, of course, a president who very much represents the moderates. He's someone who wants to keep, for instance, the nuclear agreement alive. The hardliners, for their part, have criticized the nuclear agreement, many of them saying they believe that they should leave the nuclear agreement because it constrains Iran. Some of that, of course, could translate into the politics of this country as well. One of the things, however, that we have to keep in mind, Linda, is that, of course, the final authority on anything that happens in this country is Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The president himself, Hassan Rouhani, and his cabinet, they also have a good deal of power. But the parliament certainly can make some decisions that could move the trajectory of some of the policies here in this country if it does become more conservative, in a more conservative direction, and then, of course, also become more confrontational with the United States, as well as, of course, many of the hardliners very angry at the Trump administration and some of the policies of maximum pressure. Linda?
Yeah, no doubt. Fred Clacton for us in Tehran. Good to have you there for us. We will speak again very soon. Thank you. Well, still ahead on CNN Newsroom, some passengers are still waiting to disembark a cruise ship in Japan, even though the mandatory quarantine ended days ago. So what is causing the holdup on the Diamond Princess? Plus, a second death has been reported in South Korea as the number of coronavirus cases there surges. We're going to have a look at what's behind the drastic rise in infections. Stay with us. You're watching CNN.
I'm Michael Holmes in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
to CNN Newsroom. I'm Linda Kincaid. Good to have you with us. Well, I want to return to our top story. South Korea has reported its second death from the coronavirus. That's as the number of confirmed cases there spikes dramatically. Now, infections worldwide now total well over 76,000. At least 2,200 people have died. And it comes as U.S. Centers for Disease Control issues a new travel advisory for Japan while the outbreak there worsens. Well, that surge in coronavirus cases in South Korea has been linked to a religious group. I want to bring in CNN's Paula Hancock, who joins us live from Seoul. So, Paula, this religious event seems to be now the epicenter of this outbreak in South Korea. The number of cases continuing to grow.
That's right, Linda. Yes, we've just come back from Daegu, which is a few hours drive south of the capital here, Seoul. And this is where this religious group is based. It is effectively a building where religious services were taking place. And what we understand from officials is that one individual, case 31, they are referring to her as, went to the religious services, and many other people went as well. And they believe this is where this cluster really originated from. So out of 204 confirmed cases in South Korea, 131 have been associated with this religious group itself. So it just shows what a massive cluster this is. The Korean health services here, the officials calling it a super spreading event. Now, there is concern in Daegu, in this city. There are very few people on the streets. It's a city of 2.5 million people. There are a fraction of those on the streets as we were there Friday evening, a very different scene to what we are used to in that area. And people say that they are concerned, that they're not quite sure how this is going to end. The government has designated it a special zone, which effectively means that they can bring more money into the area, more doctors to try and help deal with this. But the fear is tangible.
It's almost eerie to look at some of these bigger cities that have a heavy population that basically hardly has anybody out there on the streets right now. And now it's obvious that it's spreading into other parts of the planet other than it just being over in China. It's over in Pakistan, Iran, South Korea. So yeah, the coronavirus is in fact an outbreak that is spreading into other parts of the planet, which turns it into a global crisis. Once more, it's all part of the biblical prophecy of what's to occur in the last days pertaining to uprisings and commotions going on the planet. We're basically seeing biblical Bible prophecy fulfilling itself right in front of our very eyes. Whenever you start seeing this level of intensity with the general public like we have in the past few weeks because of this coronavirus. And it's really, really sad because we know that whenever you continue to not pay attention to the teachings of the Christianity faith pertaining to God and Christ, eventually God will uphold his protection and allow for whatever to fall upon that group of people or upon that person in a magnitude like we couldn't imagine, because Satan is out to kill, steal, and destroy, and he is the author of confusion. So at best, the only thing that we can do for a lot of these people, sadly, is just to pray for them and pray that they will give their hearts and their lives over to God before they take their very last dying breath. It's really, really sad that it takes sometimes great devastation like this to be able to wake up a society of people. A society of people that's been blinded by the devil, that's been deceived by Satan in bringing them this type of peril into their lives. It's really sad. So the only thing that we can do at this point in time is to pray for these countries, pray for these people that's in these countries, and pray that that they'll awaken before it's too late.
It certainly is. So you said they've identified the person they think might have been the first person to have this virus in South Korea. Where do they think it came from?
They're still trying to find out exactly where it originated from and how this particular number 31 got this infection, but they believe that she had contact with more than 1,100 other people, not just from this religious group itself. So what they're now trying to do is track them down and make sure that they can make sure there's no one else out there that has symptoms and that may be passing this on. They've said that she went to work, she went to a traditional medicine clinic, she visited the religious group building, she went to a hotel. So they're really trying to backtrack and figure out where exactly she went, as they believe that she may have been the source of more confirmed cases.
All right.
You keep in mind, since the existence of our country, which goes back about 240 something years ago, I believe my calculations is right. Even back before the Revolutionary War, our chemists, our doctors, our scientists knew that the lethal thing upon this planet isn't something that man can create, but it's basically something that supersedes anything that we can ever explore into pertaining to diseases. This great country over here went through various dark ages throughout pandemic plagues to understand the severity of these type of germs. And even our military to this day declares this towards it being the #1 national disaster that could fall upon to humanity as far as chemical, biological diseases. Once more, the only thing that we can do at this point in time is to pray for these people that they will awaken in their shadows of despair.
Hancock's for us on the case in Seoul. Thanks so much. Well, passengers still on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship will continue to disembark at least through Saturday, while much of the crew will be stuck on board for weeks. CNN's Will Ripley joins us now from Yokohama, Japan. So, Will, this quarantine's ended, and this particular place outside of China has more viruses than anywhere else in terms of confirmed cases.
Yeah, talk about. Right. Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Go ahead, Will. So basically, people are still going to be stuck on this cruise ship despite the fact that this quarantine is now over.
Yeah, I was going to say, talk about a massive cluster. That's exactly what the Diamond Princess is. It's the largest concentration outside of mainland China, and the number of cases continues to skyrocket. When you think about the fact that at the beginning of the month, when this ship was denied disembarkation by Japanese authorities with just one confirmed case on board, now Japan is dealing with more than 700 cases, 725 plus cases nationwide. And the number grows every single day. 3 people have now died. This is a public health crisis for Japan that it is struggling to control, but at the same time, they're allowing people off the ship. They say that people who have quarantined on the ship and continue to test negative are safe to go back out to their communities. And they have a letter from the Yokohama quarantine office stating as much. The issue is that there are a lot of other people and a lot of other governments and agencies that are not confident with the, I guess, control methods that Japanese officials put in place. So they don't necessarily consider the Diamond Princess a quarantine situation. It was more like an isolation situation, and it was an isolation in a large incubator, essentially. So we know that more people are going to be stepping off the ship tomorrow, including American citizens, but they're still going to face a 14-day quarantine when they return back to their home countries. And of course, those who've tested positive have a whole other round of tests that they have to go through before the U.S. will even consider letting them back in, far more than what the Japanese government is requiring when they're testing people.
The nightmare continues for those on board. So, Will, we understand there is this.
And keep in mind, as you sit and watch this, to my viewers, that even the time of Jesus' time, there was great distress and disease up onto the planet. People had the plague. People would be forced to go have to live off into caves in isolation to either live out their remaining lives or die a miserable life in that era. And these diseases, these outbreaks that occur, has went on throughout history, I guess going all the way back to the ancient Rome days, whenever things would happen to the abotomy pertaining to the human structure being attacked by some sort of disorder, some sort of a biological virus or bug or whatever word that you want to use, that these occurrences has been going on since the beginning of time in some form or fashion, some a little greater than others. But to have the plague is not a good thing. Today, they quarantine people a little different, and they call it different, and they attack it in a different form, but it's still basically the same occurrences that happened during those other culture-related events, going all the way back to Jesus' time. It just shows you the vulnerability of the human race towards how vulnerable that we can all become if we get out of balance pertaining to God's harmonial balance. Once we get out of that balance, then we are subject to all kinds of occurrences happening to us, regardless whether it comes in the form of a microscopic germ that's basically a billionth of the size of man, that can basically wipe out whole civilizations, or it comes in the form of volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, famines, pestilences pertaining to grasshoppers or locusts, divorces, drugs. You know, you can look at the drug problem here in America towards it basically being a pandemic. Whenever you have this many people on cotton oxys and doing narcotics to the point that we're seeing young men dying now people dying at the age of in their 20s and 30s, and children being born with all kinds of different addictions, heroin addictions and everything else. You can look at what we're going through right now here in America as it being a pandemic, in a sense. This is a sickness that even God himself said that he would throw us off into if we did not repent and come clean. It explicitly talks about that in the first 4 chapters of Revelations. And he doesn't do that or allow for that to occur pertaining to the handiwork of Satan because he hates his children. But it's a form of tough love towards trying to open up our eyes to reform us, to purge us, so that we can be that in which what the harmonial balance requires for us to be. Not just here in America, but throughout the planet. It speaks about that. You cannot defy the Word of God. People think that they can, just like there's people that think that they can defy gravity. You can get up into a spaceship and go live on a capsule for a while. But eventually you're going to have to come back home. We don't know nobody that's went up there yet that stayed up there. Nobody. So to this day, gravity cannot be defied. Not indefinitely. You can only defy it for a certain amount of time, but you can only do it during the time lapse that is permissible. So mankind needs to wake up in the vulnerability towards who we are and what we are, and why these occurrences are happening the way that they're happening, regardless whether it's coming in the form of a pandemic, or it's coming in the form of our oceans rising, or it's coming in the form of other natural catastrophes that continue to hit, not only here in the United States, but all over the planet. Mankind needs to wake up, because we are out of balance. We are out of hormonal balance, according to the will of God. And whenever we get out of balance, these occurrences that happened in other generations and in other cultures are now happening in ours. Please, those that know the truth, awaken to what is happening and tell others before it is too late.
New travel advisory for Japan. Just explain what that means, because it's happening despite the fact that the Olympics is still set to go ahead.
This is not what the Japanese government wants just months ahead of Tokyo 2020, their most important sporting event in decades. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control has now added Japan to their travel advisory list. Now, it is simply a level 1 advisory, which doesn't say don't travel to Japan. It just says if you come here, take the usual precautions, which means wash your hands and disinfect regularly. If you want to wear a face mask when you're in public spaces, and a lot of people here are doing that, then by all means. And just overall asking people to be mindful of the fact that there is a growing number of cases here in this country, again, more in this country than anywhere else in the world outside.
He's trying to downsize it to eliminate any type of panic that can be devastating not only on a human toll, but also on a financial toll. But if you look right down below the word coronavirus outbreak, U.S. CDC issues travel advisory for Japan. Anytime the CDC gets involved in doing this, it is never, I repeat, it is never to be taken on a lightly tone or a lightly measure. Never. Because whenever they get involved in something like this, they got just about as much power as, I guess you'd classify them as being a government inside of a government, kind of like the crisis centers here in the United States. Whenever we do have a major catastrophic event, regardless whether it comes in the form of a hurricane or whatever, a flood or a fire or whatever, that whenever these type of people get involved, they basically rule the roost in the yays and the nays towards what you're going to do and what you ain't going to do. We're reaching levels of predominance, not only here in America, but throughout the planet, that are mind-blowing, of seeing how that these preventions are in trial and error towards trying to prevent these occurrences from happening, but at the same time we're still seeing these events still happening. So you tend to wonder about these practices, if they're really up to snuff towards being able to deal with something on this level. Something to think about.
Of mainland China, and people should be careful. But you're still talking about a large country with 125 plus million people and only 700 or so cases. So statistically speaking, your chances are still pretty good if you're in Japan and you're walking around. But certainly for people here,
pretty good in what perspective? Pretty good in not catching the virus, are pretty good in catching the virus. So you didn't elaborate on that, my friend. I mean, you kind of just throw that out there and kept it out there in the open, which we know what you meant, but it could be interpreted the other way too as well. You know that, right?
Here in Yokohama, it's little reassurance. People are nervous as people walk off this cruise ship, and you've had infectious disease specialists warning that they could be bringing the virus unknowingly into their communities. To go more specifically into the testing requirements for the Americans, Linda, who are still in hospital, they have to undergo what I would consider pretty unpleasant and intrusive test. They have to do a nasal swab, which is a really unpleasant procedure where they stick something about this big up your nose, and a throat swab, and you have to get that done twice, 2 rounds of tests more than 24 hours apart. Your fever has to be completely subsided without the assistance of fever medication, and all your symptoms need to be gone. Then your doctor, the Japanese doctor, has to fill out a lengthy sheet, kind of stack of paperwork certifying your health condition to the United States Centers for Disease Control before they'll even consider letting people back into the country. And so these are pretty stringent procedures that are being put in place, and we know that other countries that have been repatriating their own citizens, they also have them in a 14-day quarantine as well. That includes Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, and whatnot, Linda.
All right, well, Ripley Forrest in Japan, still on the case. Thanks so much. Well, you are watching CNN Newsroom. I'm Linda Kincaid. We are going to take a very quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Film to be named Best Picture. Well, at a rally in Colorado, President Trump scoffed at the South Korean film. Take a listen.
Which was unprofessional. This was an unprofessional gesture trying to dehumanize the actors and the talents of these people that dedicated so much pertaining to this particular movie called Parasite. But at the same time, I want to bring this out too about the president's unprofessionalism in this regard. Doesn't it kind of seem odd that a movie with this type of title, Parasite, would come out during the outbreak of the coronavirus? Has anybody ever looked at that? You know, we think that stuff happens in the world pertaining to it being coincidental. I've never looked at anything towards it being coincidental. In other words, I think that there was a purpose, the reason why that this movie come out, even though it was designed and manufactured, created in a completely different country. I think that it was brought out just about the same time that this coronavirus is an outbreak, to bring more realization of the corona outbreak, because basically all a germ is a parasite. That's all a germ is. A microscopic germ, our virus, is nothing more than a parasite. And we have thousands of parasites, probably millions of parasites, that we have to deal with every day. We eat with them. We sleep with them. They're part of our lives. There's nothing that we can do about these parasites that are in our bodies and within our natural resources pertaining to our country over here, our country over there. The only difference is sometimes there'll be a infectious parasite that will be a parasite that will be unlike any other parasite, that will break away and become lethal to the human body. And this parasite can conform humanity in ways unimaginable to most people's thinking. So to me, the movie Parasite was not a freak accident or a coincidence, but it come out onto the stage just about the same time that the coronavirus comes out. And it could be a God thing more so than a coincidental thing, because it brings more enlightenment, more realness in what people are dealing with pertaining to the coronavirus. And once more, how the president degraded demoralized this particular group or this particular movie of this particular film industry was very, very unprofessionalizing. And once more, the president don't realize that he has the loudspeaker. He has the big mic. And the things that he says and how he says it does make a difference. And that's the point that the president of the United States has never truly been in tap with pertaining to reality. You know, it's one thing if you're speaking to an audience, let's say of 150, or you're speaking to an audience, let's say of 15,000, or you're speaking to an audience, let's say you have a radio or a TV network program and you got 60 million people that you're speaking to. Whenever the president speaks, he's not speaking to 60 million. He's not speaking to 6,000. He's speaking to 6 billion. And maybe even 1 trillion of the people that will be in contact with what he is saying and how that he is saying it. He has never truly understood the concept of his position, of where he holds and how he holds it pertaining to having the big mic. For some reason, he thinks that he's just like any other Joe out there that can say whatever he wants to say, do whatever he wants to do, and there's not going to be circumstances and consequences that follow him behind it. That's the part of the unprofessionalism that I keep pointing out to people about Donald Trump. There's lots of things that Donald Trump has brought into the equation pertaining to the entities that we're dealing with today that needed to be dealt with probably 25 or 30 years ago. But there's other things that Donald Trump does that is just absolutely off the wall, off the cuff, that can bring consequences.
And the winner is a movie from South Korea. What the hell was that all about? We got enough problems with South Korea with trade. On top of it, they give him the best movie of the year. Was it good? I don't know. You know, I'm looking for like, where let's get Gone with the Wind. Can we get like Gone with the Wind back, please?
See, that's that old concept of thinking. Just like his old concept of thinking that global warming isn't real. That global warming does not exist. It's all in people's imagination. Well, I just wonder if the president would be willing to walk over in China right now and try to persuade a bunch of people, oh, that coronavirus that you people have been dealing with over here, that's not real. That's only y'all's imaginations. Y'all are only imagining this disease towards bringing this destruction into your lives. That's the part that I keep talking about the president being unprofessional in. He blabs off stuff that he doesn't really realize the consequences in what he's blabbing. And it's atrocious. It's frightening to have a president that could bring great consequences to his own people like that.
Well, Neon, the company that distributed Parasite, responded to the president's opposition to the subtitled film, tweeting, "It's understandable he can't read." Well,
not only can he not read, but he can't understand various talents and various gifts of people that can do stuff to bring such truity, not cruelty, but trueness into enlightenment. And it was cruel in how the people over in South Korea was treated, in them not having opportunities like they do over here in America. And if anything, the movie should be looked upon as a historical film, almost like a documentary, because it does bring out the aspect of what the people in South Korea has been dealing with now for years and years and years pertaining to them being under this type of tyranny. It's a very, very educational film if one hasn't seen it. All I have seen is bits and pieces of it on my telephone. But from what I can tell, it is a very, very enlightening picture that brings out the trueness of what those people have been dealing with, this type of tyranny that they have been dealing with. been subjected to for years and years and years. And to think that we have a United States president that's going to degrade people for their talents, people for their gifts, and most importantly, going to degrade the fact that it was a historical film that brought enlightenment of the trueness of what people had been dealing with over in that area. To me, that's mind-boggling. That's mind-boggling that we have a president that'd be willing to do that to a professional film-making group of people in another culture, in another country. It's mind-blowing that he would... Like I said, some of the things that Trump does is off the charts towards being massively good. But some of the things that Donald Trump does is off the charts towards it being massively wrong or massively stupid or massively crazy, and how he presents it and what he's saying and how he's saying it.
In the race for the White House, candidates are pulling out all...
I'm ending it right there. I don't want to hear all this stuff about candidates. And it's not that I'm not interested in who's going to be calling the shots and who's going to be in charge, but it's in such of a disarray right now on so many different levels. I'm afraid that you could put Jesus Christ himself into office. And unless you've got other entities that's willing to follow along with the teachings of Christ and with what Christ would require for people to do, it would still be a hopeless case. You got total chaos up there in the White House. And everybody that I've ever talked to within a 150-mile distance of here tells me the same thing. And it's sad. It really is. It's sad. Thanks again to my viewers, and good luck to all of us. God bless America, and shalom.